There's a place that you get to when you're playing an instrument where you find that place within you, which is that place that we're looking for on the meditation mat, that still place beneath thought, right? And as a musician, when you're in that place, it's as if the music is playing you, right? And when we're in meditation, a practice, a long contemplative practice, there comes a point where our reactivity drifts off, and we become less attached to the thoughts that are coming. We find that wide awareness within us beneath thought, beneath having to react to every single thought that comes in. And in that sense, it's as if, our moments, then we can, I really think that's what they're talking about when they talk about mindfulness, is being completely present in what's happening and yet not being reactive to what's happening. It's almost as if life is kind of moving through you. I think that we're looking for the same thing when we're both on the meditation mat and when we're practicing an instrument or performing an instrument, when we're connecting with the other musicians on stage, connecting with the audience. It becomes like a wave of energy that's moving through us in the same way that a lot of spiritual practices can bring us to that place as well. I was lucky when I started, when I went to my first, big meditation retreat, to have one of those big experiences of the one, and I feel like that kind of, I didn't understand it at the time, and I feel like but it did kind of inform me of that idea that we can kind of be in this place outside of ourselves, right? Outside of all of our churning minds and all of our emotions, and actually allow for the world to move through us.
You're listening to The Thinning. Let's see what opens up. Welcome to the podcast, Clementine. It's really great to see you. I'm excited about this conversation. Really excited.
Me too, Stephen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I'm a musician. I make my living as a drummer, and the band that I play in, where I do that, is called Zeparella. It's a Led Zeppelin band. Mhm. And I'm also a singer and songwriter, so I put out solo albums. I'm a writer and wrote a book about my music career. And then I'm also a spiritual counselor in Buddhist and shamanic modalities. So the book is actually about what it's like to be a rock and roll drummer and have this deep contemplative practice. So, which seems like two opposite sides of the coin.
I know it does, but it's not. And you and I know that, but I'm not sure that anyone else is going to get that quite off the bat. And I'm excited to getting into it to explore these connections. So when did you start? When did you get the fire for drumming? I assume it was when you were young.
No, I didn't start playing till I was 27 years old. Um,
Okay.
and I was living in New York City, and I was kind of flailing about a bit. I had always seen myself as a writer, and at that time, I had this big sense of frustration where I felt like I didn't really know what to write about. I felt like I hadn't lived, and
Okay.
and I was trying to find my voice, and I was really longing for some kind of collaborative artistic output or outlet, and writing was not that at the time. So um, I had musicians in my orbit, and I ended up taking a drum lesson with an amazing teacher, and it just kind of clicked right away. And I just decided
No
to
pun
kind of,
intended. Yeah.
yeah, I know, just decided to kind of throw everything at that for a while because it was so, I don't know, it just really spoke to me. Yeah.
And again, a lot of us came to picking up a musical instrument at a certain age, certain kind of period in our lives where I don't know, it's more like it comes more freely. You develop, and I've got we can get into this at length. This is something that I'm perpetually just amazed by is this issue of child prodigies and where music comes from ultimately. But you didn't come to it as through music class in school or in elementary school or any trying to drive your parents crazy by hitting drums in the early morning hours. You came to it as an adult, and that's kind of unusual. Was it easy to pick up? Was it easy to feel like it was just natural to you, or did you really have to work at it?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I had had a lot of musical training as a kid. I played piano for 8 years and, was in choir and all of those kind of things when I was growing up. But then I kind of left music around the age of 14 or so. Uh, and then, so I had a bit of a musical background. And then it's funny when I feel like when you learn something young, it becomes this thing that you kind of think, well, doesn't everybody know how to do that? Right? It becomes so second nature, right? With drumming, it was so new. Like I'd never even considered playing the drums. It was such a out there idea for me, that in a way I could kind of step right into it with just total curiosity. I didn't have any goal at all toward with it, other than just kind of what was present, which was something that just really spoke to me. And now when I look at it, I look at all of the ways that as a kid I was really, I would, when I got nervous, I would tap and count. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of naturally, mathematical in all of these different ways. So when I look back at it, it does make sense that drums would become my instrument. But then also when you learn an instrument when you're later in life, you can be really thoughtful about what it is that you're doing, really intentional. And so when I started playing, I thought, okay, well, I love when people swing, right? I love music that swings, so I really want to understand how that all happens. And then I understand like, yeah, I need to be the timekeeper. Like I need to have a good sense of keeping time. And so there were these really intentional things that I could do. The other thing was that when you learn later in life, at least for me, because I didn't have any like ambition to be the best drummer in the world the way you are when you're 12 years old and like I'm going to take the world by storm. I just accepted the fact that I was gonna be the worst musician on any stage, and so I didn't have any kind of feeling of competitiveness or having to prove myself. I was just happy when it happened, and it felt like a bonus or a gift, and so, that left me to really think, "Okay, well, I'm never gonna be, the fastest or best or anything like that. I'm just gonna do what I do. Like, what is it that I really love about it?" And lean into that. Yeah.
I'd say that's an advantage too, because yeah, there is this idea that when you play music, especially as a young person, I want to be like my idols. I want to be the best. I want to be what is the best? Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
with a little age and wisdom, you realize there's no such thing as the best. It's all subjective. You can be a great technician, but have no groove, no feel. You can be I I'm going to issue a very controversial opinion here and say, there's a lot of Neil Peart worship out there. And people, are just people my age are like, he's the best drummer, he's the greatest drummer it's ever lived. Well, no, he's not. He was a great technician, but his groove is lacking in certain ways, and he doesn't, he does this one thing really, really well, but he doesn't do, it's complicated, right? It's and almost as a matter of kind of an objective of observation, he's not the best because there's no such thing as the best. It's really something that drums is different though, and I want to get into this because this is really it's not it's something you can learn, but it's also something that you have to that there's an innate kind of quality to it. For those of us who are not really well versed in drumming, tell us a little bit about the kind of nanosecond shifts that one has to make this beat feel this way.
Mhm.
Groove and feel is something that it's just mysterious to me. And I know that when I'm listening to a band, I can hear a drummer who's doing it all right, but it just, so it's like, oh, this is nice. And then there's some drummers that I listen to that are not doing anything flashy, but you just want to get up off the floor and dance. You
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah.
And I was in music school for a short time. I'm not sure anybody ever taught that. Right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
what's your take on that?
The ineffable quality. Well, so I mean, I could talk for hours about this, but
How did you learn? How did you make the shift from being, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the hat, and then, how did you make the shift from playing like that to taking on one of the most iconic drummers in history?
well, let's talk. I mean, John Bonham is a great from Led Zeppelin is a really great place to explain why what that magic is, right? Because of all the drummers, it's very rare for the greater public to know the drummer in the band, right? I mean, the drummer is usually, they're back there, and it is kind of a mysterious thing that's going on back there. So, but John Bonham, I mean, he's so deeply loved by so many people, and it is because of the feel of his drumming, and the Led Zeppelin songs when I started, playing drums and I listened back to Led Zeppelin, that was my favorite band when I was like real young and thinking, oh, that's why I loved that band is because of the feel. And so when you're talking about the feel of a drummer and really any musician, but you're thinking about the space between the beats, right? So say there's four beats in every measure, and the space between the two, like the one and the two, is like this infinite chasm of time. And where a drummer places the beat, places like you can play right on the downbeat, you can place it just a little bit ahead of the downbeat. And these are like very small increments of time, or right behind the downbeat. And though that space there makes for the drummer's feel. Some drummers play very precisely, like Neil Peart was very precise in how he played in his time. John Bonham was known as playing a little bit behind the beat. And somebody like, let's see, like somebody like Charlie Watts, sometimes in some of the performances, they like to speed things up a little bit, right? Now, Charlie had impeccable time, but like speeding it up a little bit created this kind of excitement, right? So, so that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about feel. And the reason I think that John Bonham was such a maestro is because where he placed that happens to be in a place that is it's when we talk about playing a little behind the beat, it's almost as if where there's a slight anticipation, like, and this is very subtle, but it's like a slight anticipation, and it's like he's taking his time, which gives it an authority. Right? Like, we know when people are speaking really fast, we know that we tend to think, okay, they're nervous or they're super excited or something. Somebody who is really intentional about how they're speaking, we kind of give them more authority in a way. And it's the same with playing a musical instrument. And there's something about the way that Bonham played where it's both, feels very authoritative by the place that he's placing those beats. I also feel like he felt like um, he was able to bring a kind of emotionality to it as well. And when we talk about drums, I mean, basically, human beings are a drum, right? We have a drum within I mean, our heart is a drum. It's this beat um, that we're connected to, and that beat informs us about the way that we recognize rhythms that respond to us, right? That it's like we kind of have our own timekeeper within us. And so that's why we have these tastes around different drummers, you know? I mean, some people they just vibrate at a higher, speed and maybe they really like, speed metal like is like their thing. Like that really speaks to them because that's the energy that they feel within themselves. And so
I
I think
remember,
that we're
I don't know if you ever saw it. There was a movie that was kind of a biopic on James Brown a few years ago, maybe 12 years ago. And I remember this one scene where James Brown is very frustrated. I can't even remember who it was in the band, but he was frustrated with one of the members of his band, and he says, it might have been one of the horn players, and he says, what's that instrument that you've got in your hand
yeah,
there? And he says,
he's like,
it's a
yeah,
saxophone or
yeah,
whatever, and he says,
mhm.
no, that's a drum.
It's a drum, yeah.
And then he goes around all of the band, all of the members of the band. We're playing things that are not drums technically.
Mhm,
We
mhm,
know they're horns or saxophones, they're trumpets, etc. What is that? It's a
mhm,
drum.
mhm,
What's that? It's a drum, Mr. Brown. And
mhm,
it's this powerful scene where you realize that his whole musical vision was around rhythm.
mhm,
It's got a harmonic element to it, but it's all about where those beats land and how all that works together in a band. The drummer, of course, is the most the player that is the easiest to identify in that role,
mhm,
but
mhm,
everybody and what I love hearing you say is that, we've got a drum here. We've got
mhm,
drums, we are a drum, just like,
mhm, mhm.
Godfather of Soul, pointed out, to all of the members of his band, so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, I know, I love that scene, and, it really is true. But again, it really does have to do with taste. I mean, some people are just, you know, the rhythm aspect, you see certain musical players and, the melody is the thing for them, In my mind, like, melody devoid of that deep understanding of rhythm, isn't as interesting to me as
So
somebody
then
who
you get into
really
some of the
locks
old
in.
jazz classics like, The Girl from Ipanema, which has been kind of characterized, or caricatured in this kind of elevator music kind of way, thanks to Frank Sinatra and a million other people who covered the song, but the original Brazilian version of this
That's
song, she
beautiful.
is singing so far behind the beat.
Mhm,
It's like you almost talk about lending it authority and
mhm,
sensuality just by holding it back.
mhm.
I think that's why I'm a Southerner and I talk slow as it automatically
Yeah.
gives me, no, I'm kidding, but it's fascinating. It's really
Yeah,
fascinating. And
yeah.
and and John Bonham was this master of, yeah, pulling it back, I am, if you wanna point to, I don't think he was the greatest drummer, but I'm a huge fan of, Jeff Porcaro and Steve Gadd, and I got the chance
Mhm.
to hear Steve Gadd play in a club in DC a few years ago,
Mm,
play a jazz
wow.
gig. Steve Ferrone,
Mhm. Wonderful
some of these
drummer.
great drummers, and just listening to the way, this artful way that they dance around that downbeat,
Mhm,
it's not, Porcaro would not take a solo in a
mhm.
concert because he didn't consider himself to be a drum soloist. That wasn't his thing. He didn't consider
Yeah.
himself a technician, but he was a master he was very heavily influenced by, John Bonham.
Yeah.
The beat that he came up with for Rosanna was basically he said, "That's just Fool in the Rain," with the Bo
Uh,
Diddley,
mhm,
behind it, that bump, bump,
mhm,
bump, bump, bump,
mhm,
kinda added to Fool in the Rain. So,
mhm.
Bonham is extremely influential. It's a little bit gutsy, I think, to try to take that on. So let's go. Let's talk more about that. So what got you we have a million kinds of music to choose from when we decide we're gonna, kinda go in one different direction. What was it about being a drummer in a Led Zeppelin? And I love the idea, an all female, Led Zeppelin cover band. That's just
Mhm.
incredible. Um,
Well, it was really, I mean, I started the band because I wanted to, I wanted to play more often than I was playing at the time. I was in a band with my guitarist, Gretchen Menn, and we were in a band that wasn't playing very, that was turning down some opportunities that we thought we wanted to take. And so I had had the idea for the band a few years back, and I kind of floated the idea with her, and it really came from just wanting to get better as a drummer. And Bonham, because I think because the that was music that I was obsessively listening to when I was 14 years old. It's just the way that I feel music, and my dad was a big music lover. So all of the music that I listened to when I was a kid were like the Stones and the Beatles and, like John Lee Hooker and like blues based stuff. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. I didn't grow up listening to bebop or anything. That's kind of my natural, like, my natural zero is at that way of playing. When I had thought about wanting to learn Bonham's stuff, and I was talking to Gretchen about wanting. She, was like, I would love to learn, some of Paige's things because she also had, an early love of Zeppelin. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, we should do it on stage. I mean, we should do it for real, if we're really going to kind of start this little
Pointing, sitting in
practice
the garage for
project.
years and
Yeah.
years and years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was really about learning, getting better on our instruments and, learning our heroes' parts. Yeah.
So then, let's turn it just a little bit away from the strictly musical and strictly, groove
Yeah.
oriented kind of thing to the spirituality piece. Cause I am absolutely, I'm dying to hear, your take on how these two things are not two things, but they're one
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. They are. Well, when you're playing music, and you know this because you're a musician, there is, there's a place that you get to when you're playing an instrument where you find that place within you, which is that place that we're looking for on the meditation mat, that still place beneath thought, right? And when, as a musician, when you're in that place, it's as if the music is playing you, right? And when we're in meditation, a practice, a long contemplative practice, there comes a point where our reactivity drifts off, and we become less attached to the thoughts that are coming. We find that wide awareness within us beneath thought, beneath having to react to every single thought that comes in. And in that sense, it's as if, our moments, then I really think that's what they're talking about when they talk about mindfulness is being completely present in what's happening and yet not being reactive to what's happening. It's almost as if life is kind of moving through you. I think that we're looking for the same thing when we're both on the meditation mat and when we're practicing an instrument, when we're performing an instrument, when we're connecting with the other musicians on stage, connecting with the audience. It becomes like a wave of energy that's moving through us in the same way that a lot of spiritual practices can bring us to that place as well. I was lucky when I started, when I went to my first, big meditation retreat to have one of those big experiences of the one, and I feel like that kind of, I didn't understand it at the time, and I feel like but it did kind of inform me of that idea that we can kind of be in this place outside of ourselves, right? Outside of all of our churning minds and all of our emotions, and actually um, allow for the world to move through us, and for us to also be very present in it. It's hard to talk about these things, but I think that's
You're doing a good job. Before we keep going, a quick pause. This isn't meant to be a podcast you listen to passively. These conversations are meant to be carried forward. If something in this episode is raising questions for you, the best place to continue the conversation is on Substack. That's where I share short reflections, episode notes, and where listeners can respond and talk with one another. You can find the link in the show notes. Now, let's keep the conversation going.
um, sometimes I wonder if it's just that when you have those experiences of everything being the all, right? Everything being what you would call God or spirit or just one vibration, that means that you are as divine as anything, right? It means that all is divine. Like if there's something outside of the divine, then there is no divine, right? If the divine is all, then the divine is me and it's everything. And maybe it's that idea and that realization that is takes away the authority um, of saying somebody else knows better or somebody else is the one. I
Well,
wonder if,
that is one characteristic I'm really starting to see in sharp distinction is that one of the differences between people in kind of mainstream theological study and people who are just the category is spiritual but not religious. The difference as I'm seeing it is that the traditional theological folks say God is out there, and uh, the spiritual folks say God is here. There's there's a I can't begin to overstate the difference and the way that's going to work itself out in the world when we understand God is not here, but it's there,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
we're all connected. We're all part of the divine. We are all sharing in this spirit, and maybe some of us are more aware of it than others.
And wasn't that what Christ was all, I mean, I feel like, that's what Jesus was talking about, was that, we are all this, like we are all the son, right, of God. We are all that. That's kind of what I take from my Catholic upbringing. And, I remember the split in my mind, like, but that's not what I remember sitting in the classroom saying. So everything's God. So he said everything's God. So the table, the pencil, like, being a little kid and saying that, and yes, yes, yes. And then at a certain point realizing like, oh, wait a minute, but that's not what this is. We are going into something that doesn't have anything to do with that. And um bringing it back to the drum, the drum was the instrument that was, the spiritual instrument for, back 40,000 years or something, played by people in ceremony, played by, the religious or the spiritual person of the tribe, to bring back messages from from nature. It was a lot, and women were playing the drum. Um, One of the first things I think that the that the church did was outlaw women playing instruments because of that power, right? That power of that uniting, using the drum to unite people in kind of one heartbeat and one, in one rhythm, one spiritual place. Uh, so yeah, I
Have you
hear
ever
you in
been
that.
part of a have you ever done anything with a drum circle before?
I do, and then, in the spiritual counseling model that I do, I use the drum to help with people to go kind of into deep meditative states. Mhm.
Okay. Can you describe any of that?
Sure, the modality that I work in to help counsel people is called depth hypnosis. It's a combination of, Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, Western psychology, and shamanic techniques. And when I say shamanic, I mean that earth-based wisdom, right? So, all of humanity has that background, and there are certain practices and ways of seeing healing in that, and certain techniques that are used. So, they've found that the sound of a frame drum induces the same kind of brainwave state as deep meditation. And so listening to just the repetitive sound of a drum can help you to go into that space within ourselves, like we're talking about, that we find in meditation, where we're in that kind of non ordinary space where images and metaphors are coming up into our awareness that are helping us understand ourselves, the situation that we're looking at, and yeah, it's very helpful.
Interesting. Exciting. Um, so your spiritual journey has led you away from your Catholic upbringing, which I think I don't know, that seems I don't mean to be snarky, but that seems to be a common thread amongst most people who've been to Catholic school, as
Hmm.
children. You
Yeah.
can't stay with it for very long after that. But toward Buddhism and more shamanic, more earth-oriented spiritual practices. Again, what was the connect what was the move that you had to make? What drew you towards another way of thinking? What was that transformation like?
Hmm.
And what were the difficulties along the way?
Yeah. Well, I was raised, my mom was Catholic, my dad was an atheist, right? So I had this funny dichotomy in my house, and I was really daddy's girl. So I think I grew up very questioning of the whole situation to begin with. And I really loved, learning about Jesus. I thought that he was the guy. And, but I really didn't enjoy all of the stuff that went on in church. I didn't like the incense. I didn't like having to sit for 2 hours and, in the pew. I didn't, it was uncomfortable. I didn't get it. I didn't feel like I didn't understand what the guy up at the pulpit was talking about. It was like, it didn't speak to me at all. And I had my dad at home, like relaxing where I wanted to be. And immediately I kind of had it was a bit of a split for me. I went through because I wanted to make my mom happy. I went all the way up to confirmation. And then pretty much the day that I got confirmed, I said, okay, I'm an adult. I'm an adult, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, if I'm an adult, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that was it. And then I think I really kind of went into a feeling of, trying to convince myself that of, a true materialist path, of no spirituality. And for I think a number of years, but I realized that I had, I just kept having different experiences of kind of bigness, and realized that some of the literature I was, just avid literature person. Most of the literature that I loved touched on those themes, those bigger themes. And one day I realized that I had this sense of having lived before that I'd had since I could remember, and I could not get rid of it. I couldn't, I just kept feeling like I just feel in like there's a continuation of lives, and I just stepped into it. I just said, okay, I just can't get out of this feeling of this. And then, started
And your
reading.
Catholic upbringing wasn't particularly supportive of that kind of exploring
That's
that
right.
notion, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then, I started reading about Zen Buddhism and got really excited about the idea of getting outside of getting into a place I think that I had experienced as a child where you're outside of your personality, right? Your thoughts and personality and gotten and that connection, there's something about connection, vibration with everything that felt really powerful to me. And I found because I kind of went into that more materialist idea for a number of years, when I found Buddhism, I thought, isn't this what they're talking about? Like the small piece contains the whole, like isn't that what science is saying? Isn't like it felt very scientific to me, the way that like Buddhism is explained and Buddhist philosophy is explained. And it felt more scientific to me than it did religious in Buddhism. And I also really like the idea that it's a personal thing to me. I thought I like the idea that, I don't know anything other than what I'm feeling. I don't know if everything I see is just some sort of weird, dream or manifestation. Like everything is suspect other than sensation on the body. Like that's what I can physically feel. Right. And when I started to kind of go down that road, Buddhist practice seemed like it was for me.
So, what's your take on channeling?
Well, I know people who do channeling who I believe that they are tapping into something bigger and something else. That I've seen enough. I've seen enough truth come through people. That it's pretty astounding, actually. That I think that I do think that there's a way for people to open to to something else and bring it through. Yeah. And I, I feel like I have had experience doing that. When I was a kid, I remember lying on my bed. I loved writing and I'd lie on my bed and I would take a deep breath and then I would just write. And then I would look down and be like, oh, that's really cool. It was outside of the thinking conscious mind. It was this other thing. So I feel that I am kind of natural at that. When I played drums for a long time, I would invite something to play through me. Now when I started doing the practices that I do now, I realized that's probably not a good idea to invite yourself to be used by a spirit without any
E
kind of
Explain. That's interesting, explain.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of different energy I think that people can channel, and I think it's good to have some guardrails as to, what's being brought through. And when you're in a rock club where people are drinking and doing a lot of drugs, there's a lot of extra energy that's coming out into the room that, that is maybe not of the highest vibration. And
Okay.
probably a good idea to not allow all of that to, if it comes through, to stay, certainly. Yeah.
A lot of people are starting to talk, I think, about the connection between music and the spiritual realm and how that is how music can be a conduit from the greater, the beyond, the thing that is that connects you. And it seems to be mostly, I think all of us have an experience of that when we listen to music. But especially when those of us who play music, that's a big piece of it. That moment where, I'm I'm still I think listeners are gonna get tired of me talking about this. I'm still trying to figure out how my oldest child, when he was 3 years old, 4 years old, could sit down at a piano and compose. And he composed songs and sounds that he had never heard before. They were far beyond him. They were 7 and 9 and 12, and
Mhm.
13 chords that resolved to each other and had phrasing and had flourish and, stuff that he had never even heard in the household. And here it
Mhm.
was. And I'm still trying, that's kind of a paradigm to me for other prodigies, Mozart, where does this stuff come from? And I think that those of us who play and uh, riding a motorcycle, same thing. I started riding just a few years ago, and I remember there was a time where it was like, okay, click this thing down, do this, uh, make sure you've got your hand, it was very technical. It was very like, oh, I got to focus, I got to concentrate. And then it started to flow, over time that the technical kind of started getting out of the way. You still have to devote a lot of resources to it because your life's, on the line,
Mhm.
but there's also this flow state that you can get into that, where you're in control of as much as you can be in control of, but there's something else happening. I think there's a lot of things in life where we touch upon that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you're sitting down and you're playing, you're basically channeling Bonzo. You're you're channeling one of the most iconic drummers in the history of rock and roll in some way. And is that an accurate statement? Would you say it that way, or how would you modify that? How do you respond to that idea?
Um, well, I mean, people say that all the time to me, and that I'm channeling him, and it's really interesting to get inside of somebody's drum parts because in a way I feel like I'm almost getting inside of their body. I mean, I have dreams where I'm walking around with, kind of arm in arm with him, right? And I know how his, like putting my arm around him, I know how he feels, right? That's that kind of thing. It's fun when you're playing somebody else's drum parts because it's such a physical thing, right? And it's like I feel like, oh, my back has to be like, I have to put my back into it here, or I have to, lighten up here, and all of those things. Ultimately, I don't know how much I feel that like Bonham, his spirit is coming through, but more like that the what he was doing was creating a channel for the audience to feel, right? And so when I'm playing, I feel more that what's happening is that I'm connecting with the other instruments on stage, other musicians on stage, and we're creating this circular kind of feeling with the audience. With it's like everybody's attention is in the same place, everybody's heart is beating in the same rhythm, and we're all kind of channeling the moment, right? And it's the moment and the energy of the moment that I feel. And when at the end, if, when people are clapping, I don't ever feel like it's for Clem. I feel like it's for the moment, for the thing that we created during that 6 minutes of song, right? That one kind of attention all together. To me, that's the exciting channeling to me is where we're all channeling together that that vibration of love, that vibration of oneness, that vibration of joy, everything that Bonham created when they were creating that those songs. So I do feel like I really love the idea of spirit. I've connected with my father who died before he ever saw me play drums. He died when I was 30 or so, or 27 or so. And um I feel that, I felt him, very close to me before. So I'm not out of the idea that like I could channel, somebody coming through while I'm playing. It certainly seems like the physicality of it could enable that to happen. Um, but the thing that I love these days is really the whole, like everything coming in that whole place.
So, in other words, if I might, again, I'll ask your permission to confirm or deny this premise, but it's not just that you're channeling John Bonham, but John Bonham was channeling something else.
Yeah, yeah,
And everybody in the band is channeling this person who is also channeling something else, who it all goes back to the whole. We're all, when we're participating, when we're listening, and it's just, that's cool. That's
yeah,
great. That is a
yeah.
really great insight.
Mm,
We put so much stock in our heroes. We put so much, my spirit animal is Jaco Pastorius. First time I heard him play is like, I've gotta figure that out. Where is that
yeah.
coming from? Because again, I heard something that was from somewhere else. And then he certainly lived the kind of life that let me, it was just that terrible, awful, tragic, early death
Yeah.
kind of thing that's like, oh yeah, well he really wasn't from around here. He
Mhm.
really was from somewhere else in the
Mhm.
universe, and brought something. And people who don't know these people can't, I apologize. I really, it's hard to describe some of these things, but we all have this. I think we recognize that there are these people that come along in history and in our lives that connect us with something that is just, we can't explain. We can't describe it. We want to be like it. We want to imitate it, but we can't really do that. And I've heard a million people try to imitate Jocko's style. It's not possible. You can't do it. There is something to his sense of rhythm and beat and groove that is, you can't do it.
Mhm.
Nobody can do it. Nobody has been able to do it. Nobody, people come close, but it's not, it's an imitation more than it is a, you know, I don't know. But we all have these heroes, and we all seek to we kind of put them on a pedestal. But maybe the lesson here is that we have to realize that they had heroes. They had their influences. They had their uh people they had on the pedestal who also had theirs, and on and
Yeah.
on and on. And maybe the greater lesson here is to allow your hero, allow your that person that connects you, allow them to connect you with the whole rather
Yeah.
than just with them. How's that sound?
I really like that because, when it comes down to it, human beings are very flawed, very flawed, right? I don't aspire to live the way John Bonham did. My heart breaks a little bit because I feel like the way that he lived, to me, it kind of points to somebody who did his only outlet, his only real ability to process emotion was through drumming. I mean, it just seems that way. Somebody who needs to numb themselves so deeply um, with substances, I think, is it points to having a real difficulty in the world expressing um, how you're feeling, and that's pretty heartbreaking to me. So yeah, I don't really, I've never been one who really idolizes, my heroes just because, you know, when I really look at the behavior of the band that I'm contributing to, it wasn't always really in the highest, integrity and with other human beings. And I've really had to come to terms with that, and that's one reason why I'm happy that we're not a band that imitates the way that they looked or, imitates the musicians the way that they acted or looked. because and be able to really settle into the music because that's where they were at their best, I think, was when they were creating that music. And I don't have any desire to emulate their personal lives.
Right, and isn't that the story with all great musicians? I mean,
Mhm.
I can't look at a single one, it's like, "Wow, oh, he really had his shit together." Oh, it's like there is something inherently flawed, and again, back to good old Jesus here, it's interesting to me how, one of the chief accusations against him was like, your master, your teacher, talking to his disciples, hangs out with tax collectors, prostitutes, lepers, blah blah blah. The really the scum of the earth people.
To me, that's the reason that
And
I loved him, right? It's
well,
like because he saw the beauty and, and the redemption in all beings. Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, the love your enemies passage in the Gospel of Matthew is the most powerful one because it points at and the turn you have to make is realizing it in the Greek, love your enemies. Your is a plural. It's
Mhm.
plural. It's not. We're not talking about the guy next door that I can't stand who has his dog poop in my yard. It's not that kind of thing. It's about groups of people who are told by their leaders, we are enemies with them, and we have to, and we're seeing a lot of that in our culture today where it's immigrants, it's people, rapists and murderers who emptied have been emptied from mental institutions, in other countries and come here, and there's this othering that our leaders, whether you're it's not just an American problem. It's been
It's
going
one of
on
the
since
oldest stories, right? That's one
it's
of the oldest
yeah, it's
stories,
it's
yeah.
it's it's the very thing that Jesus himself seemed to say, no, 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 you don't. If you love your neighbor and you hate your enemy, then you're just like everybody else. You need to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
different. You
right.
need to love you know, and it's not, again, it's not loving the person who's kind of messing with my yard or something. That's not so much. I mean, there's an element to it, which that's what it's about. But it's really it's more about, you need to love the people that everybody says you shouldn't love, and that's where you're different. That's where you are to be
Yeah.
different. And by the way, that's what God does. God sends rain upon the just and the unjust, you know, and you need to be, and that we get so caught up, especially in Protestant circles, you be perfect, therefore, as your Father and your God in heaven
Mhm.
is perfect. And we take that one out of context. It seems to me that he's specifically saying, be like God in this way of loving those who don't love you back. And that's, wow. I mean, that
It's one of
changes
the y
everything.
yeah, it's one of the most difficult things, kind of going back to the idea that, like, if there is nothing outside of the divine, right? If one thing is, then nothing is. If the divine is all. In that sense, I really my view is that each person has the spark of the divine in them, and the behavior can be horrific. Um, And when I see somebody behaving in a terrible way, to me, it's a divine being who has forgotten that they have that light within them. And so, really, how tragic that is that somebody could get so far away from that. And when we see all beings as having that spark of the divine, then that's where I think compassion, empathy opens up. That's where the problem solving can come into because they're not the other, they're us. They're connected to that same light that's within me. And how is it that they've come so far away from that? And we look at people then with the idea of empathy and compassion, which is my belief that without that, none of our problems are fixed.
So, the casual observer could kind of look at the framework for this conversation and say, Well, she's a drummer and she plays in a tribute band and she's a spiritual person. And so what's this conversation going to be about? Is it going to be about being a drummer in a rock and roll band, or is it going to be about spirituality? Wrap this up and tell us what the two have to do with each other.
It's the same thing. I mean, everything that we do is our spiritual life. Our spiritual life is our life. You know, the what we bring. It doesn't matter the actions that we're taking in our life. What passions we have, what pursuits we have. You know, those are unique to our personality. But ultimately, I think that you know how we live in integrity, how we live in empathy and compassion. You know, that's the real story, I think, behind each person. And so, you know, I think that, you know, it's kind of what I wanted to write in my book was that, yeah, it seems like one, you know, being a rock and roll drummer is loud and sitting on a meditation mat is, you know, quiet. And so they seem like these dichotomies, but you know, some of the loudest things I've ever heard are sitting on a meditation mat and listening to that noise that is within myself. Um, and some of the the most stillness I've ever felt is, you know, allowing a song to move through me and connect to the audience. Um, so I think that, you know, looking at our lives as you know, how can we be in this moment fully? How can we connect? How can we let go of our defenses, connect our hearts to the people that we're encountering and with? How can we see the world as a vibration of the divine? How can I honor that in every moment in integrity? You know, I think that's all that is being asked of us.
Well, I don't know how you have this level of a conversation at 5:30 in the morning, out where you live. And I'm really grateful for you bringing it big today. This has been, this is, you know, this is a fledgling podcast with no audience right now. And so, you know, maybe down the road, people will find this conversation and hear it. Maybe, you know, they'll stumble across it in some spirit guided way. I don't know, but boy, this has really made my day. I'll
Me
tell you
too,
what.
Stephen.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
such a delight talking to you. Thank you so much. I just love your insights. Yeah.
Well, this is something, you know, I don't play a lot. You know, I don't play very much. I've got some gear. I pick it up every once in a while as a distraction from the normal work that I do, and but I don't ever play live anymore. For me, it's kind of like I don't want to be in a garage band. I'm like you. I don't want to be in a garage band. It's like let's get on stage, man. Let's just play. That's the whole point.
Do you ever
And
play with your son?
this is a funny story. This is an interesting thing. This was when he was 4, we bought him. He moved from banging on pots and pans, which he could really lay down a groove. Excuse me. And we bought him. I traded in a bass that I had on a set of Tama drums, an old set of
Mm,
Tama
mm.
drums, full set. And when he was 4 years old, we used to sit in the basement, and we worked up the Black Crowes version of "Hard to Handle," and he could
That's
kill it.
wonderful.
He could
That's
kill
wonderful.
it. And and yeah, we started giving him lessons.
Mhm.
Destroyed it.
Oh,
Destroyed it. We were like, "Oh, he's got this gift." I mean, it's like parents do, you know, you got this
uh,
kid. Oh, we've got a he's a prodigy. He's brilliant. We've got to
uh-huh,
channel this somewhere. And then by channeling it, and it was the same way with him playing baseball. He could knock the softball out of the park until
uh,
his coach told him how to properly hit. And then when he was being taught how to properly hit, he couldn't
interesting.
connect.
Huh,
And that's been a real big lesson for me. Just well, not less of a lesson than more of a just a curiosity is what's going on there, you know, and
mhm,
the attempt to discipline and to teach and provide structure around something so people can do it right.
Mhm.
And then how that completely destroys the passion sometimes. So he programs. He's an app programmer for Apple,
Mm,
and
mhm,
he uses his musical acumen, which is considerable. He
mhm,
every once in a while he'll sit down to a workstation and fire off some EDM song that's just like,
mhm.
dude, where did that come from? He still
Yeah.
does it some, he's never really had an interest in playing. He took drum
Mhm.
lessons for a long time, and uh, but never really. It was never something he really wanted to do. But I think his I think his musical ability turned into coding and programming
Uh-huh.
and finding, and he's very good at it. It's very good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and
Well,
I've got
that's a
4
lot
kids
more
and they all
lucrative.
have, well, perhaps, but, yeah, I've got 4 kids and they all have, their own individual extraordinary abilities. I just, always found that one to be one that I could, kinda like, "That's really gotta stick a pin in that because that's
Y
really
yeah,
really just the fact that he could sit down and compose for a half an hour, for an hour, and
it's
just
amazing.
play. And
Yeah,
I've got some old, 8 millimeter, videotapes in the garage that I'm starting to transfer. One of these days, I'm gonna find one of those because we did tape him doing it,
mhm.
and yeah, it's gonna be a whole thing when I
Oh, that's
find that.
great.
So,
Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah.
wonderful. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
again, Clem, thank you so much for the time and for the conversation, and hope to connect again sometime.
I
Where
hope
can we
so
find out
too.
about your band? Find out about you? How do we connect with you going forward?
Yeah, I have a website called clemthegreat.com, and, everything that I do is on there.
Great.
Yeah, great.
All right. Well, have a good day.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thanks so much.